I grew up with this mistaken belief that success was defined by your status and your job title and how much you were earning. On paper, it looked successful, but inside I felt empty. It is far better to be moving slowly up the right mountain than to be moving fast up the wrong mountain.
Simon Alexander Ong is a best-selling author, award-winning coach, and international keynote speaker whose work has reached audiences at Google, the London School of Economics, and stages around the world. His book Energize, published by Penguin and winner of the 2023 Business Book Award, has been endorsed by Simon Sinek, Marie Forleo, and Marshall Goldsmith. His central belief is simple: energy, not time, is our most valuable resource. And when you learn to manage it well, the way you lead, work, and live can fundamentally change.
The longest journey we as humans make, which are the inches from our heads to our hearts. Most people are exhausted not because they are doing too much, but because they are doing too little of the things that bring them joy. The life you want is built in the margins of the life you have.
Simon, thank you so much for joining me on Catch the Upswing.
My pleasure. I'm looking forward to it.
So Simon, your best-selling book, Energize, has really been a game changer for so many people who've, really reflected on how they are spending their time, their energy. And I would love to dig into topics of the book. Before we do that, I would actually love to start with your own journey and path, because what I find very interesting is your path initially started with good education, finance career, kind of what we understand conventionally as the great success. What was it like for you at the time? Was there a time, where you were genuinely content? Or was there always kind of a quiet discomfort and wondering what else you could do with your life?
Yeah, there was a journey in there, because I grew up with this mistaken belief that success was defined by your status and your job title and how much you were earning. And so my family and peer group were always saying that when you graduate from college, if you were able to land a job as a banker, a lawyer, a doctor, or an accountant, you have created the platform for a successful life. And so as a teenager, I would watch films like Wall Street and Boiler Room and be seduced to follow the path of finance. I graduated in 2007 and I started finance at what was probably the worst possible time, a year before the financial crisis swept across the planet, and with a company called Lehman Brothers, which collapsed into administration 14 months after I joined as a graduate. So initially I was happy about landing that job because I felt that for me would be successful. It would be the platform to be successful. But in hindsight, I think the financial crisis was a blessing in disguise, because it got me really asking myself questions such as, well, what is my definition of success? Is this what fulfillment looks like? And the answer was no. On paper, it looks successful. All my friends would say, well done, congratulations on the career you started to build. But inside, I felt empty. And I think it was at that moment I realized that it is far better to be moving slowly up the right mountain than to be moving fast up the wrong mountain. And so the experience kickstarted for me the longest journey we as humans make, which are the inches from our heads to our hearts. Never an easy journey, but the most fulfilling one that we will ever embark on. And that led me to what I get to do today, by really understanding myself, my strengths, and what I wanted to give back to the world.
It's very interesting because, as you mentioned, the 2008 financial crisis was really a rupture for many people. And I think it was an inflection point for many to really wonder about the future and, how they can best spend their life or their time.
Absolutely. And this kind of, this reminds me of a word called pronoia, which you may have read in the book. So many of us understand the word paranoia, which is this belief that somebody or something is out to sabotage our progress or our journey to the next level. Pronoia means the opposite, which is the belief that life is working in our favor, that the universe is conspiring to help us get to wherever we want to be in life. And so when you experience setbacks and challenges like that, it can either defeat you, or if you view life through the lens of pronoia, you can ask yourself, well, what is this giving me the opportunity to do? What is this teaching me? And so instead of dwelling about what has happened, which you cannot control to some extent, you're focused on the thing you can control, which is your response. How are you going to respond to this? How are you going to use this as an opportunity to become better, stronger, and more purposeful with your choices in life?
It's so interesting. And it actually, it's such a powerful mindset shift to actually turn it around, right? To flip it and to see the other side of it. I wonder, when you were still in that career, in that moment, what was it? How did you notice, wait a minute, let me actually rethink what I want to do? Because I wonder if somebody's listening and perhaps they're like, my life looks successful. I'm genuinely content, but I wonder if maybe, there's something I'm missing. Like, what are some of these signs that you noticed yourself?
For me, there were a couple. The first was every Sunday night and Monday morning at the beginning of a new week, there was this physical manifestation of pain in my stomach. You know, that feeling people might describe as the Monday blues or not looking forward to the week ahead. That for me was a huge sign, because if you actually enjoy the work you're doing, if the work you're doing is an extension of who you are that allows you to express your talents and your gifts, you're going to look forward to every week. You're looking forward to the opportunity to share that with the world. You're excited about possibility. I wasn't. It got to Sunday evening and I was dreading the week ahead. I was spending 5 days a week looking forward to the 2 days at the end of every week and the holidays that I'd booked. And I thought to myself, that is no way of living. I can't be living my life, spending most of my time looking to a future rather than living in the present. So that for me was a huge sign. And I think the fact that my mind kept drifting elsewhere, I would go to work, I would do the work to the best of my ability, but I would also find myself going into the toilet cubicle, going for a walk at lunchtime, daydreaming about what else could be possible beyond the walls of the offices I was in. And I think lastly, it was also looking at people who were decades ahead of me in the office and asking myself, do I want to be in their same position when I am that age? And the answer was always no. I didn't know what I wanted to do aside from the work I was doing. But for me, it was kind of like a wake-up call to explore my curiosities, to use the time outside of work and on the weekends more productively to begin that exploration. And I've said to a lot of people who have felt the same as me, is that the life you want is built in the margins of the life you have. And those margins are the time outside of work and the weekends. Are you using that productively to explore your potential? Or is that time being wasted? And so that for me was kind of the initial wake-up call, was realizing that this wasn't something I saw myself in decades from now.
It's very interesting because, as you say, if you really listen to your body and reflect, you notice those early signs, right? That something seems off,
And I think the challenge for a lot of us is we mistake busyness for productivity. So I always have to be doing something in order to feel productive. And busyness can actually become a distraction from doing the work of reflection. If you don't give yourself time to reflect, you don't get to know who you are. And wisdom begins with knowing yourself, knowing your strengths, your weaknesses, your challenges, your goals, your intentions. That comes from self-reflection. But we avoid it. We numb ourselves through being busy. And we just add more and more to our to-do list. And so we end up confusing busyness with productivity, movement for progress. Just because you're moving a lot doesn't mean you're making progress. And so we really have to be intentional about creating that space for stillness and reflection, because when we go inwards, often that's where we find the answers about what that next step should be.
If you're enjoying this conversation, the easiest way to support the show is to subscribe. Wherever you're listening or watching, it takes about 3 seconds and it genuinely makes a difference. Thank you so much for being here. There's also a lot of talk that we are in a mental health crisis globally and the topic of mental health. And you have also spoken very openly about the risk of burnout. And I wonder, beyond kind of the clinical definition of burnout, I wonder if you could describe for us what it feels like on the inside, because I think often people don't realize it until it's too late, right? And so what are some of those signals that you are heading towards burnout?
Absolutely. So when I think about energy, just to kind of step back for a moment. When I think about energy comes through 4 aspects. So you have physical energy, which is all about sleep, movement, and nutrition. These are the things that we can observe and feel. So if you're not getting enough sleep, you know that you wake up feeling exhausted before the day's even started. If you're not feeding yourself right, then you feel exhausted as well, because you end up going into an afternoon coma. You lose your energy very quickly. And if you don't move your body enough, then you're in a very low state of mind. There's a big difference between the mind you feel before you move your body and the mental state you're in once you've had a good exercise or a good workout. The second is mental energy. Now, mental energy is about your ability to focus. It's your mindset. It's how you can reframe and respond to things in a healthy way. Emotional energy is relationships, relationship with yourself and the relationships you have with other people. And then spiritual energy is all about meaning and purpose. And in each of these areas, you can experience burnout.
Oh, that's so interesting.
So, for example, spiritual burnout is when the thing you thought you wanted is no longer the thing you want to do. And so if you are doing work that goes against who you are, that doesn't allow you to express your talent and gifts, that isn't aligned to your values, you will feel burnt out because you're not doing the thing that makes you feel alive. So I started to notice in society, most people are exhausted, not because they are doing too much, but because they are doing too little of the things that bring them joy, and they're running someone else's race. And that's what creates spiritual burnout, when you are constantly running someone else's race by living up to someone else's definition of success and living up to their metrics of what progress looks like. It's a race you can never win because the goalposts keep moving. But if you own your definition of success, if you are clear about what a successful life looks like to you, and you protect that, then you are spiritually high in energy, you burn out less. Physical burnout is, well, if you don't get enough sleep, you don't move your body enough, and you survive on junk, then clearly your body's going to shut down. Your body's going to tell you, you need to slow down, you need to rest, otherwise we will force you to rest. And they force you to rest through illness. So you experience physical burnout through illness. Mental burnout is when your brain just goes foggy, where you can't focus, where you can't concentrate. And that's because you are overloading your brain and you're not closing some of those loops. So there's a psychological term called open loops. And the more open loops we have, the more stress and the more risk we have of burning out mentally. And an open loop are things that you know have to be done. It could be a conversation you've been putting off. It could be a task that you haven't done for whatever reason. So those things are still open in your head, which means they weigh on your energy until you close them. Once you close them, you feel lighter. And it was based on this experiment where a psychologist went to a cafe, and she noticed that what happened with the waiters is they would take orders. And when they took an order from a table, they could remember everything that table ordered. But the moment that table paid for their bill and left, they forgot the order. And the reason they forgot is because they closed the loop. And then they were able to forget about that order. A lot of us still have open orders in our head. We haven't closed them, and that weighs on our mental energy. And then emotional energy, we experience emotional burnout when the relationships we have around us are toxic. If you have toxic relationships in your environment, whether they are toxic colleagues or culture at work, whether it's people around you who drain you of energy, who don't challenge or encourage you to grow as a person, then that drains you emotionally. So you could be burnt out in any one or a combination of these areas, which just compounds that experience.
And I think this is such a powerful reflection, because often we think about burnout in quite a one-dimensional way.
Yeah.
You know, you think like, oh, it means that you're working 24/7 and you're not sleeping and you have constant stress. But I think we talk much less about the aspect of purpose or being around toxic people, or, you know, the mental load of closing those loops. So it's super interesting.
And it's fascinating because one can almost offset the other in the short term. So for example, there may be seasons in your year or life where you might need to sleep a little less. So it could be you are promoting a new product or you're promoting a new service. And there's a few weeks around that launch period when you might be having to do a lot of PR, a lot of interviews, a lot of talks, and a lot of promotional activities. But what happens is that if that thing you are doing and promoting is meaningful to you, all those hours don't affect you the same way. they actually give you energy.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're doing those same hours with something that doesn't give you joy, that isn't something you actually enjoy, then guess what? It burns you out faster.
That's very interesting. And it actually makes me reflect a lot about just my lived experience, because for the past, let's say 15 years, where I have been really working on things that give me purpose, so, really trying to improve the state of the world, I've actually worked very, intensely. Like work has been basically my life, but it has always felt high energy, easy. I haven't really felt stressed. And I've been reflecting on this, sometimes I've kind of critically reflected, is it maybe because I'm so in the habit of it that I don't reflect enough, right? And sometimes I think you can also just like not feel it, but maybe there is something. But then I remembered when I was still at university, I did an internship at one of the big four. And it, was like an business-wise interesting, but like it gave me no purpose. And I was drained, like the whole internship. I had enough hours of sleep and I still felt tired and everything felt like really heavy. And so I was reflecting on, is it actually that purpose that kind of gives you energy, even though you feel like objectively it should be taking your energy because you're giving so much, but somehow, it just kind of gives you more energy to go.
It does. And again, this is why energy is so important. You could give somebody 4 hours to do a particular task. If somebody goes into that task energized, those 4 hours would be insanely productive. But if someone goes into it with no energy and no connection to that work, that 4 hours would be procrastination. They would not make use of those same 4 hours. And so if you show up with a particular kind of energy, you get far more done. You accelerate further than most people. And so if you can bring these things together, do things that give you energy, with people that give you energy, with people that challenge you to think at a higher level, guess what? Suddenly you approach everything with a lot greater focus and a lot greater attention.
Yeah. It's very interesting. And when you talk about, you mentioned, energy across physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual dimensions. I wonder which of these are, kind of the blind spots to leaders that you see more often, because you've been working with so many business leaders from around the world. Yeah. And I wonder, what is it, which of these are the ones we pay least attention to and maybe don't actually realize it?
I would say from experience, it is emotional and spiritual. So physical energy is the easiest. If you just speak to your friends about New Year's resolutions, chances are at the beginning of every year, people would probably focus on their health. I need to have a better diet. I need to exercise more. I need to get more rest. These things are obvious because they're spoken about, and you can usually see it in someone with regards to their physical energy. Mental energy, that's being talked about a lot more when we think about mental health, when we think about activities that are good for your mental energy. But I think emotional energy and spiritual are less so. And that's because time to reflect, time to understand yourself, to really work on your relationships is usually time that we push aside. So if you look at somebody's calendar, especially somebody who is high performing, most of that time in the calendar is focused on two things. One is what I would call management time, which is meetings, administration tasks, to-dos. All of this stuff is what I call management. The second is creation time. It's doing the thing that you've got to do to move your business or your career forward. This is how we spend most of our time. But the emotional energy is time to know yourself. It's doing the reflection. Do I have blocked out in my calendar me time? Time just for me, not for other people and meetings. And in spiritual energy, it's really asking yourself deeper questions. Am I doing the thing that actually makes me feel alive? Am I doing something that is going to contribute to the legacy I want to leave? And if not, what can I do now to pivot myself to something that gives me purpose, that allows me to make an impact? And then that emotional energy with other people is asking yourself, do I need to change up my environment? Because a lot of us, we love being in environments where people praise us, where we are the smartest in the room, but we find it less comfortable when we are in rooms where we might feel like the dumbest person in the room. But those are the rooms that are going to challenge you to be better as a human and better in terms of what's required to get you to where you want to be. And that's what I enjoy, is myself building relationships with people who inspire me, who challenge me and encourage me to think different and explore things I probably wouldn't have otherwise if I wasn't in their orbit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love this aspect of getting out of your comfort zone, because that's really where the growth begins. And, also kind of getting inspired or getting that input from others, right? And different perspectives that you would have otherwise not considered.
Absolutely. It taps into this concept called the proximity principle. And the proximity principle states that when you are in close proximity to people who are doing incredible work, who are making a big impact in the world, who are living with intention and purpose, it expands your set of possibilities. Mm-hmm. And that is one of the fastest ways that we can improve our life in any area. Somebody asked me this question recently, Simon, what would I do if I wanted to move faster in a particular area of my life? Mm-hmm. And I simply responded by saying, create an environment around you that makes it impossible not to succeed. Because when you create an environment around you that makes it impossible not to succeed, from what you read, what you listen to, what you watch, the communities you're a part of, the people you have conversations with, then you will find you quickly become not only a magnet for luck, but a magnet for opportunity.
And I think that beautifully links back to what you mentioned about the aspect of the people you surround yourselves with.
Yeah.
And how it can really drain our energy and also lead to a form of burnout if we are surrounded by toxic people. How do you, personally go about that if perhaps the people who actually drain your energy are close to you?
Great question.
Yeah.
And I think when we think about environment, there's two parts to it. Mm-hmm. One part of the environment are things you can control. Mm-hmm. So you can choose to show up or not show up at an invite that a friend sent you. So it could be going to an event, going to a conference. You can decide if you go or not. That's in your control. And there is also an element of your environment which you cannot control. So if you're working in a company, it might be who your boss is. It might be who your colleagues are. It could even be someone close to home. It could be a family member or family that you cannot control who is in your family. Now, when you're looking at the part of the environment that you can control, that comes to creating strong boundaries. What is my criteria for saying yes or no to an invite or an opportunity to show up somewhere? And you can get to choose what you consume. But it's being intentional. What do I consume? What do I say yes to that will allow me to make progress to where I want to be? On the part of the environment that you cannot control, it comes down to how do you limit your time, knowing you cannot fully eliminate that time, but how do you limit your time with the people and environments that drain you? Mm-hmm. And if you know ahead of time they're going to drain you, how do you dilute that energy? So, for example, when I was in the corporate world, sometimes I was in places where the environment was a little toxic. Knowing that effect on me, I could dilute that by listening to calming music when I was in the office or my commute, reading some personal development books when I was on the commute to and from work, and going for regular walks around the office that I was based in, doing things that would help me reset my energy, knowing that the conversation I was about to go into or the meeting I was about to attend had a high probability of draining me during the time I was there.
And I wonder if that somehow connects back to this idea of closing the loop, because often when we are in these more toxic or energy draining environments, we don't necessarily remember what is said, but how people made us feel. And that's often some baggage that we carry with us. Yeah. And it's almost like feels similar to this idea of closing a loop and leaving it behind. Is there like a practice of how you can, say, okay, like I had to go to this meeting, it was energy draining. I tried to dilute that, but now I am also kind of making a cut, and I won't take either that negative energy with me or the memory of what people said that made me feel uncomfortable. How would you go about that?
Yeah, well, first of all, two thoughts to that. First, it reminds me of that Maya Angelou quote, one of my favorite quotes, where she says, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but they will never forget the way you made them feel. And feeling is an emotion. And emotion is just energy in motion. It's the energy you bring into every interaction. That's why I'm a big fan of the saying that energy is your most attractive trait, because it's how people remember you. Now, how do we process and understand that? How do we find peace with the experience of closing that loop of an experience being draining? Well, for me, it's reflection, it's journaling. Journaling is a great activity to do to understand what you're going through and to come up with solutions as to what you can do when that happens again. And a friend of mine, Diana Chow, she did a TEDx talk. And she said a line that for me was so profound. She said, writing is humanity distilled into ink. Writing is humanity distilled into ink. Now, what that means is that through the process of writing, of being present in the moment, of downloading what is in your head onto paper, first of all, you get to better understand yourself. You start to understand the emotions you're feeling, the experience you're going through. But two, it helps you to create clarity as to what to do next, as to understanding, well, how do I resolve this? How do I close that loop of this is what I've experienced? What is this telling me? How can I respond to this? How can I act better when this happens again in the future? Otherwise, we end up just being stuck in our heads. We think about our thinking, and we overthink so much that we don't do anything about it.
Yeah.
And the past just keeps repeating itself again and again.
It's really interesting. Just a quick pause to highlight a good practice example. In October 2020, Hurricane Delta hit Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. It damaged towns, coastlines, and the Mesoamerican Barrier Reef, the second largest barrier reef in the whole world. What happened next was really unusual. The reef itself was insured. So not the hotels built on the coastline, not the fishing boats, not the tourism infrastructure, the reef itself. 2 years earlier, Swiss Re had worked with the Nature Conservancy and the state government of Quintana Roo to create something that had never existed before. A parametric insurance policy with the reef as the insured assets. The design was simple but radical. When hurricane wind speeds in a defined area crossed a pre-agreed threshold, then a payment is triggered automatically. So no damage assessment, no claims process, no waiting. Just funds released immediately so that the restoration teams can get into the water before the damage becomes irreversible. So when Hurricane Delta struck, the policy paid out almost $800,000 within just a few days. Then 80 divers, marine biologists, and local conservationists were deployed. They stabilized over 1,000 coral colonies, and the reef recovered. The Mesoamerican Barrier Reef is home to thousands of species. It has protected these coastlines from storms and erosion for thousands of years. But for a long time, none of that made it into something the financial system felt responsible for protecting. The problem wasn't that the reef wasn't valuable. The problem was that nobody had designed a financial product that recognized this value. Swiss Re did. And that model has since been replicated across reef sites throughout the Mesoamerican region. It's a powerful example of what becomes possible when we stop undervaluing the assets that sustain everything else. Now let's get back to our conversation. I want to double click a bit, this idea of managing your energy.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people are obsessed with time management.
Yeah.
What is the difference between time management and energy management, and why should we focus on energy management?
Sure. Well, here's an easy analogy. So if we start with time management, it assumes that our energy is constant throughout the day. So you might open up your diary and you will say, okay, here's all the tasks I need to do today. And you just start grabbing the tasks and putting it into every time you have spare in a particular day. Now, the issue with that is you haven't considered your energy. So you've put all of these things in your diary to do, but what if your energy is lower in the afternoon, higher in the morning, and non-existent at night? Well, you're not going to do it with as much focus, the stuff in the afternoon and evening. So knowing that, it's about how do I reorganize my diary around my energy? If I have higher energy in the morning, then clearly the most important thing to focus on is the biggest, most challenging task. If I have lower energy in the afternoon and the evenings, maybe I reserve the admin stuff for then, or the thing that doesn't require as much brain power. If I find myself naturally declining in mid-afternoon, how do I do something that resets my energy? Maybe mid-afternoon, I go for a walk in my local park. Maybe I do a meditation. Maybe I watch something that inspires me. So late afternoon, my energy isn't as low. So first it begins with awareness about your own energy, how it fluctuates throughout the day, the week, and the month. And second is, how do you start optimizing your calendar in understanding that and how these things can align?
And if somebody listening wanted to do an honest energy audit for themselves, how would they go about it?
Well, today it's never been easier than before. So you might have a tracker. If you are wearing one of these smartwatches or smart devices, that now can track your energy. So you can actually see what your energy level is like from the moment you wake up to the moment you sleep. So if you track that for, let's say, a week and look at that data and see what it tells you, you can start to build around that. Now, if you're not using a smart device, then it's just simply checking in with yourself. You know, how do you tend to feel on a Monday morning? How do you tend to feel on a Wednesday afternoon? How do you tend to feel on a Friday morning? Now, as you track that, as you notice how you feel, you'll notice when you are more productive and less productive. This is why I often ask companies, when do you hold your most important weekly meeting? Now, for many companies, it might be first thing on a Monday. But then I follow up with the question of, how do you think people's energy is like first thing on a Monday morning? And that's when they begin to realize that maybe people's energy isn't as high on a Monday morning compared to, let's say, a Tuesday afternoon or Wednesday morning. And so there's a bit of a disconnect here where if somebody holds their most important meeting on a Monday morning, but the energy is the lowest for their employees, how does one expect to get contribution and input from them if the energy is really low? And so it's how do we bring the two together, not just personally for the individual, but also understanding the energy of the team and your organization so we can lean into that by working to their strengths.
Yeah. Very interesting. And it actually gets me thinking, even when you're planning for an important meeting with somebody external, you know, if you're, for example, planning a fundraising pitch or a really important meeting with a potential partner, also thinking about how their energy might be at a certain time of day.
Yeah, this is why there's been studies that show if you are pitching or you're looking to win business, Wednesdays and Thursdays tend to be the best days to pitch or hold those meetings. Fridays, it's toughest because people are already thinking about the weekend. People are starting to switch off. Mondays, people are worried about what they have to catch up with because they've just started the new week. But by Wednesday and Thursday, they're stuck into the week. They're looking forward to what's to come. They're in much more focused mode in the middle of the week. And so, it's just understanding how people's energies work and how to lean into that and use that to your benefit there.
So I wonder if somebody listening, you know, has been putting some of this into practice and they actually realize that they would like to make a bold move. So let's say they are more in a conventional career. I often talk to, let's say, lawyers or bankers, and they're actively thinking about taking quite a bold step and doing something completely different that is more aligned with their purpose that they have identified. But it often feels like taking a big risk, and, you know, also kind of what people around you say. I wonder, when you decided to take that big step, how did people in your environment react to that?
I got questioned a lot because my environment was only people who were in finance that I had gone through college with and university. So they were a little skeptical, as people would be if they've never started their own business, if they've never pursued their own path in life. And so I found that one of the things we don't talk about enough, especially when we transition from one career to another, from being an employee to being an entrepreneur, is you will go through a period of loneliness. There is this part where you say goodbye to your old self and you are building the new self, but you haven't yet arrived. And so you end up losing people that you may have spent a lot of time with before. And you are now in this process of finding your community or your tribe of like-minded thinkers. And so I think when we go through personal growth, not only do we evolve, not only do we become a better person, but also we have to accept that our circle starts to shrink, because not many people in your present environment may understand what choices you're making now. Leaving something that to them will feel very stable, very safe, very predictable, for something that is the complete opposite, unpredictable. You're not sure when you're going to get paid. You're not even sure if it's going to succeed. And so that's why one of the first things I had to do was to change my environment. I wanted to spend time around people who had done what I was about to do. Mm-hmm. Who were the people that were once in jobs like me and shifted their life to do something that was more fulfilling. So the environment gave me the inspiration to be bolder in the choices I made. That environment held me up to a higher standard. And then the second step was then thinking, what is the smallest thing I can do that doesn't put me in the panic zone, but just stretches me a little bit? Mm-hmm. Because I knew that confidence isn't what I needed. Courage is what I had to lean into, because confidence comes after. Mm-hmm. Once you have the courage to do something, even just a little step that you have never done before, that feeds your confidence to be bolder the next time. And when you're surrounded with people who are just turning up in very powerful ways in whatever they do, that also feeds your energy to show up in a very similar way. So it started with environment. It started with taking small steps. And the third, I think, is patience. Patience in understanding that these things don't happen overnight. You're not going to make that big leap in a week or a month. These things are going to take time. But if you can find patience in the journey, consistently show up, just doing one small thing every single day, those things will compound. Your habits compound, your relationships compound, and that growth itself will compound over time.
And it really strikes me what you said about that period of loneliness. And I actually wonder if even before you take that leap and let your environment know about your bold decision, that you start surrounding yourself already with people on the other side, you know, so that you're not only getting those critical voices, but also encouragement, because you kind of
shorten
the gap.
It might not be in person. So now I'm very fortunate and very privileged to spend time around amazing people in person. Mm-hmm. But of course, when you're at the beginning of your journey, you won't know a lot of these people. So they may start to be just mentors through books. In my case, it was that. It was the books I read. Those authors became my mentors. It was like they were teaching me through what they had written in their books. People I watched on YouTube, people I listened to on podcasts, even in my head, I would create a mental board of advisors, something I share in the book, where I could walk into a room in my imagination, like a boardroom, take a seat and have 6 people, 3 on my right, 3 on my left, dead or alive, where I could throw my challenge or throw my question into the middle of the room and just listen to what each person would say if they were giving me advice or trying to guide me in the journey I was about to embark on.
That is probably my favorite point in the book. Yeah, I really love that, because I think it's also so powerful to, you know, really think that you don't have to know these people personally nowadays. It can be like a mental board, you know, of advisors. Yeah, I really love that.
And that's where it starts, because what it's actually doing, even though that board doesn't exist in real life, it exists just in your imagination. What it's doing is it's giving you perspective. It's helping you realize there is always another way to see what you're going through or approach a challenge that you're about to undertake.
Yeah. So one thing I've been wondering about is, I feel like most people know what they should do and they still don't do it. What's going on there?
I think the answer is in the word you use in that question. Should is if we think about the things we should do, we're not actually going to do it, because should is another word for interest. I'm interested in making that leap. I'm interested in sharing this idea. I'm interested in speaking with this person. Now, interested or should is 50-50. It means you haven't actually decided. So great if it happens, but hey, if it doesn't happen, there's always next year or the year after or the year after that. But when you are committed, and for me, there's a big difference between commitment and interest. Interest, I'm not fully aligned if it works out or not, but commitment is that I have decided. I've taken a decision. I'm committed to this happening. As you notice, the language changes. Yeah. It's no longer this year, I should try this, I should explore this, I should speak to this person. It becomes I must and I will. I must make this happen. I will go to this event. I will speak to this person. And you can notice the energetic difference between somebody who is committed and somebody who is just interested. You could say to your friend, that person's they're going to make it happen. No matter what's going to be thrown their way, they're going to see this through because you feel a level of commitment. So for me, what stops a lot of people is they're not committed. They haven't actually decided. And so they have a list of shoulds and needs. But what they should do is ask themselves, what must I do? So instead of writing that list of shoulds, ask yourself, what must I do? Switch that word and notice how different it feels. Instead of, I should go to this event, I must go to this event. I should connect with this person, I must connect with this person. It feels more definitive. It actually feels like this is something you're going to follow through with. So that's the first thing. Shift the words and the language you use to increase the probability it happens. And second, schedule it. Schedule it in your diary. Because if you don't schedule it, it's in your head. It's not actually been put down onto paper. And then 3, make sure the opportunity is booked in.
Yeah.
So for example, if for me, my goal this year is I want to speak at events, I want to practice more public speaking. If that is a must, then what I do is I put time in my diary to practice. I put time in my diary to watch how other speakers present on stage. And the third step, I book in an event in the diary. So now I'm committed. I'm telling people I am going to speak at this event. I can't back out now. I've put it in the diary. I will figure out a way to make sure that by the time that event happens, I am there speaking, I am there doing what I said I was going to do.
Yeah. And that connects to what you said, that confidence comes from doing it. So you first just need to have the courage to do it, and then confidence will follow.
Absolutely. And again, we find the courage by being around other people who are courageous, who just naturally do the thing without even thinking. And that gives you an element of courage. Okay, I'm going to try this. I'm going to give this a go. I'm not attached to if it works out or not. I'm just going to do this to grow myself, to see it as an experiment. And if you can see this as almost like a game where you have to upskill in order to get to the next level, then that process becomes more enjoyable because it's fun. That's why we like games. We play video games, even though video games might be challenging to get to the end of the game, because we're so immersed in it, we're present. And the challenge is what excites us. We know we have to learn something to beat the boss of a particular level to get to the next part of the game. And so if we see that in our own journey, of the journey being a game, and each level being a part of your growth, and each challenge being a necessary step to get you there, then for me, it kind of makes you show up in a very different way. Yeah.
I think this gamification aspect is so powerful because that makes it more fun, right? And if you have a moment of self-doubt, you're like, oh, I'm actually getting to the next level. This is normal. And if you have a setback, you think about it in a different kind of in perspective of the game that you're in.
Absolutely. I think gamification is very underrated in terms of an approach to life, business, and career. I just came back from doing a talk in the US the other week, and one of the ideas I shared with the audience is this concept called the Wormhole Effect. So in physics, a wormhole is a theoretical shortcut connecting 2 different points together that allows you to get from one to the other faster than any conventional means. And if you were to explain it to someone, you may get a piece of paper, you draw 2 points on either side of the paper, and you connect them through a line. And for me, the line represents the journey that most people go on. They see their journey as a linear path. But if you fold that piece of paper in half, that point now goes straight to the next point if you punch a pencil through it. So when I saw that, I said to myself, well, how can we create our own wormholes? How can we create our own tunnel or shortcut to get from one to the other? And once you start to understand that, you see it everywhere in terms of people being courageous, people being bold to make things happen. And so I was at one of Richard Branson's launch events for his book, Finding My Virginity. And there was a guy a few rows in front of me, near to the front of the stage, but this was an auditorium of a lot of people. And the game in this case was, how do you get Richard Branson's attention in a room of hundreds and hundreds of people before he exits the stage and flies off to wherever he's speaking next? So this person a few rows in front of me, he gets out a piece of paper, he writes down his business pitch, puts his contact details at the bottom, folds the piece of paper into a paper airplane, and throws it on stage, and it reaches Branson. He picks up the piece of paper, he reads out the pitch to the audience, passes it to his team, and says, "We will get back to you."
Amazing.
And he was able to create his own wormhole in that moment by getting the attention of Branson in front of a huge auditorium. That accelerated his journey into Branson's world. just by thinking different, acting boldly, and having the courage to do what most people wouldn't do.
Mm-hmm. And so if somebody wants to start adopting, that mindset or that approach, it's kind of, I guess you would somehow have to remind yourself daily, or at least in important moments, of this idea of gamification, and then of this shortcut, and then really thinking outside the box on how you in a moment can
absolutely. And this all comes down to one word, which is creativity. Mm-hmm. And I think in a world where artificial intelligence is taking over a lot more of the work we're doing, the ability to be creative is still human. Yeah. I've got a 6-year-old daughter, and if you look at children, children are creative. They're very creative individuals, always looking for solutions or how to get that toy, how to get their what they want. They're always looking for solutions. They're very creative with how to get something. And I think we are all innately curious and creative. We just end up growing up and losing that spark. But if we can find that and rediscover that spark of creativity again, that's how we start to make it more fun. That's how we look for doing something different in a very novel way, and how to gamify a process.
Mm-hmm. So you work with a lot of high performers who have, big goals that they want to achieve. And a lot of people in my community have, feel like this tension between wanting to achieve really big and bold things, and at the same time wanting some peace and, this idea of feeling alive while you're doing it. How can we manage that tension and, keep it kind of in balance without either ambition or peace kind of killing the other?
Good question. For me, it's moving away from attaching your emotional well-being to something that may or may not happen. Mm-hmm. So what I mean by this is when I first started my own journey, and when I first started to learn about coaching and learn about personal development, the big issue I had is that so much of our emotional well-being was tied to goals, was tied to an outcome or a destination. So when I get that promotion, then I'll be happy. When that business hits $1 million, then I will be fulfilled. Now, the issue with a lot of these things is you can't predict when they happen. You can't predict when your business has a great year. You can't predict if somebody's going to say yes. And so by attaching your emotional well-being to something in the future that may or may not happen, what does that mean you are in the present? Does that mean you're anxious? You're living for a future that may or may not happen? You are easily frustrated? So what actually happens is this tragic scenario where a lot of us live as if we are never going to die, and then die having never really lived. Mm-hmm. So we're not actually ever living in this moment right now. So the way I found peace is just to focus my efforts on being better than who I was yesterday. Because if I'm constantly better than who I was yesterday, the rewards will eventually come. But I'm not attached to when and how they come. I just have a deep knowing that if I keep showing up in a way that is impactful and purposeful and that is aligned to my values, the rewards will work out their own path back to me. Mm. And so for me, it's a daily practice of gratitude. There's a daily practice of being in the present, and being open to everything, being open to one conversation changing my future, one introduction, one speaking event. I'm not attached to how and when it happens. I get to enjoy the moment. I find peace in the fact that I'm at a place where the young version of me probably would never have imagined. At the same time, I'm just focused on what can I do today that will move me a little more forward. And then whatever happens, I'm open to it. Mm-hmm. But if I can keep increasing my luck surface area, what happens is I open myself up to a great range of possibilities.
I think that's so powerful because it's also, you almost have to create also some space, right? Yeah. To be in the present moment and also to be open for all the possibilities that perhaps you're not even imagining. And if you're too attached to one specific outcome, maybe you actually miss like the bigger picture and something bigger.
Absolutely. I mean, I'll give an example. When I left the corporate environment, my initial goal was just to build a very successful one-to-one coaching practice because that was all I knew at the time. I'm really fascinated by this area, and I attached my emotional well-being to it. But as I became wiser and started to learn more, I decided just to be open, do the best I can, impacting people's lives, but also be open to opportunities that may come up in the process. And because I was open, that opened me up to speaking opportunities. I got invited to speak at companies and conferences and festivals. And again, I was open to connecting with people afterwards. They then connected me to other events. That opened me up to have a conversation with Penguin to write the book Energize. When the book came out, that opened me up to speaking at more places worldwide, from just connecting and building relationships with people. That opened me up to mentoring new business owners, to advising new startups, creating content on YouTube, doing a lot of different things that I could never have written down all those years ago as things I wanted to do, but just stuff that opened up because of what I was doing, opened up opportunities through the people that came across my work, whether they were clients or whether they were people that saw me talk at an event.
Yeah. Yeah, I really love those examples because, and also what you mentioned about, you know, this practice of gratitude and perhaps even having a conversation with your younger self, because many of us achieve things that we would have never dreamed of, you know, when we were a child. Or even if you are perhaps, you know, on this track that is not leading to happiness, just by talking to your younger self, you might actually identify the mismatch. Absolutely.
And the thing is not to forget that growth is the key. The British philosopher Alain de Botton once shared this quote, which I love, and he says, when you look back a year from now, if you are not embarrassed by who you were then, you haven't grown enough.
Oh, wow.
Because what he said is that if you are constantly growing, if you are developing, evolving, and challenging yourself to be better than who you were by acquiring new skills, expanding your relationships, trying things that you never done before, but that will help you get closer to where you want to be. When you look back at the person you were a year ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, you should be embarrassed by that person because you've grown so much. You know, you will look back and say, well, why did I do that back then? But time has taught you what you needed to get to where you are today.
Yeah, I really love that. It's harsh, but I love it.
It's harsh, but I think it speaks to the power of growth. Is that it's like looking at someone's YouTube channel, for example. You might look at their latest video, but if you scroll all the way down to their first video, you can imagine how embarrassed that person would be about that first video. But you also see the growth from that very first video to their latest video.
Yeah. Very good point. I wonder, is there a piece of advice in the, you know, personal development world that you think is quietly doing damage, that is not serving us?
I think the message is probably doing the most damage. It goes back to something I shared earlier about business being productive, or we mistaking business as meaning productivity. Is this sort of hustle culture where it's been championed for so long. I think now it's starting to shift, or it has shifted over the last few years. But there was this thing of, if you're not working all the hours in the day, if you're not working hard, if you're not pushing, how do you expect to be successful? Now, don't get me wrong, you know, hard work is important. You have to work hard and work harder than other people to get to where you want to be. But I see work and rest as partners of the same team. Now, if you work to the exclusion of rest, no doubt you will burn out. If you rest to the exclusion of work, well, nothing gets done. And so it's really finding that balance between when do you push and when do you pull back. And that for me is a real balance. It's not, for me, the balance isn't about work-life balance. Because the people that I've spoken to who were seeking work-life balance, the reason they were seeking work-life balance is because they hated their work. So of course they want to enjoy more of life because they don't want to spend too much time at work doing the thing they don't enjoy. So for me, it's less about work-life balance. It's more just a balance. So you get to not only push ahead, but you get to enjoy life at the same time. So it's a balance between push and pull. When do you push? When do you pull back? So you get to spend time with your loved ones so that they don't just get what's left of you. They also get some of what's best of your energy. And you get to have time reflecting, understanding who you are and what you should focus on. So for me, it's hustle culture has probably been the most damaging because it actually heightens burnout. It's by shaming people for not working harder. It's shaming people that they're not spending enough time doing things without realizing that we're not machines. We can't be on every single day, and our energy is not going to be the same level every single day. So it's asking ourselves, well, given how I feel today, given the season of life I'm in right now, what's the best I can do today, given those constraints? Mm-hmm. Even if it's one tiny thing you can do each day, that's what's important. It's consistency over intensity. Intensity might work for short bursts, but again, it will put you into burnout. Mm-hmm. But if you're able to stay consistent, some days you might go stronger, some days you might go softer, but you keep the rhythm going, that consistency will compound.
Let's talk about some of the very concrete things that somebody listening or watching, can start implementing. Yeah. So what you say is one thing somebody can do tonight?
So one thing you can do tonight is look through your calendar for the next week and ask yourself, are the things I've said yes to, are they a hell yes? Or are some of those things a maybe? Because often we are quick to say yes to things. We like to please people, but we haven't actually thought about our response first. And so maybe we agreed 3 months ago that we were going to say yes without consideration of the future when that event would actually come up. And now we're coming close to those events. We might be asking ourselves, why did I say yes to it? Mm-hmm. My diary is so packed now. And so first we'll look at your calendar, ask yourself which of those things is an absolute yes. And if it's not, how can I either cancel, postpone, or just disregard that event? Mm-hmm. Because then you can use that time to work towards where you want to be, or to spend time resting, whatever's going to be most productive for you, given where you are right now. Because we don't do enough of that. We're quick to say yes to meeting invites and to social events and holidays, but we're not so quick to say yes to me time. Mm-hmm. Time where you can be with yourself, you can plan, you can strategize, or you can just switch off.
Do you put your me time into your calendar and take it as seriously as an external me time?
I think that is important. Whatever goes into your calendar, as best as you can, you stick to it. Mm-hmm. You follow through with it. Treat it as if it's an actual meeting. If you had an important meeting in your diary, you still turn up. Yeah. How do you do that for the me time as well? And also have some time where, I would call nothing time, where you just do nothing. So it could be 1 day a week. It could be half a day on a weekend. Just block it out as nothing time. But here's the key though. For a lot of people, when they think about nothing time, what do? We go straight to our phones. Mm-hmm. We scroll, we binge watch stuff on television. Okay, that's fine. If you say for half an hour, for 1 hour, I'm going to binge watch television, that's intentional. But the thing is not to allow that to then seep into your whole me time. And then it just becomes watching television, then just becomes scrolling content on your phone. Mm-hmm. So it's how do you be intentional with that me time? So it could be disconnecting, reading a book, going for a walk in nature, maybe having a long afternoon with friends with deep, meaningful conversations, whatever that may be. But it's being intentional with that time. Mm-hmm. And making sure that becomes a part of your routine and not a reward for having done the thing and then burnt out and then saying, now I get to relax.
Yeah. I think that's very important, right? Because I think when people are at the edge, they wait so long and then they go on vacation and they immediately become ill on vacation. Yeah. And that's like the signal that you've pushed it too far.
Absolutely. And that's why it's important not to wait until that happens. And that's why I always champion to people I speak to and I coach is how do you integrate those moments where you can reset, rejuvenate, and recharge your batteries, mm-hmm. so they're part of your everyday. If you think about your devices, every day you recharge them. Mm-hmm. But do we recharge ourselves every day? Yeah. Probably not. We wait until the end of the week, we wait until the holiday, we wait until the end of the month or Christmas or summer, and then we recharge. And often that's too late. But we need to recharge ourselves as much as we do our devices.
Yeah. So we talked about what somebody can do tonight. What's one thing they can do tomorrow morning?
Well, one thing they can do tomorrow morning, and I would say it actually begins the night before, but it impacts tomorrow morning, mm-hmm. which is plan your day the night before. And the reason that impacts your morning the next day is you wake up in the morning, which is often when we have our highest level of energy, knowing what your priorities are. And when you know what your priorities are the moment you wake up, you can get straight into your day with intention and purpose. But often because we don't plan our day the night before, we wake up in the morning and we waste all of that energy deciding what am I going to wear, how am I going to get to work, how do I prepare for this, What do I have to get done today? And by the time you get stuck in, all of the energy has been expended in decision making.
Mm-hmm.
But if you decide all of that the night before, so how will I know tomorrow will be productive? What are the 3 things I must get done so that when I'm back in bed tomorrow night, I know I've had a productive day? That gives you focus. What am I going to wear tomorrow? Well, get that out, lay it on your bed, lay it on your living room, wherever it is an easy sight, so you know what to wear, put it on and go out.
Yeah.
How am I going to start my morning? Am I going to do a workout? Get my gym bag ready, put it by the door, so it's already all packed for me to go. So what can you pre-plan and pre-prepare? So when you wake up, you're able to be focused. You know what your priorities are. But also, that activity ensures your sleep quality is better. Because then you're not going to sleep thinking about all of these, again, open loops the next day. You're not going to bed thinking, oh, what's the transport going to be like tomorrow? Because you've seen already if transport's going to be working, if there's going to be a strike, if there's not going to be a strike, you can pre-prepare already.
Yeah.
You know what you're going to wear. You know what your plan is tomorrow morning. You get up, you can go straight into motion.
And it's so simple and so powerful. Like it can make such a big difference.
It's simple, but we as humans, I think we overcomplicate things.
Yeah.
We like to say to ourselves, how can it be that easy? There's got to be a strategy, or there's got to be something I'm missing, a hack of some sort.
Yeah.
If you speak to doctors, there's a famous proverb that goes, if you eat an apple a day, you keep the doctor away. How many people actually eat an apple a day?
Yeah. And your book gave me the permission to add the banana back.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
I was told to drop the banana. I added it back.
But bananas are great energy. Bananas are great energy givers. I mean, if you look at, I don't know if you follow tennis, but if you watch Wimbledon, the French Open, or some of these Grand Slams, you will notice when players are deep in their matches and they sit down, they hydrate, and in many cases they eat a banana. Yeah. Because it gives them that boost of energy when they go back onto the court.
Yeah. One thing somebody listening can change about how they go about their work this week.
One change go about their work this week. Well, I think one of it is linked to planning your day the night before. So if you think about the working week ahead of time, ask yourself what would make this week a productive week. That kind of gives you an overarching view as to what your priorities are. And the thing is, what must happen then for you to follow through with that thing that will make your week productive? And then scheduling it into your calendar. And giving yourself a timeline, actually. I think that part's important. So give yourself a timeline to get that thing done and adhere to it. Because if you don't give yourself a timeline and, I don't know, you've got a week or 2 weeks to get this project done, you will fill up that entire time doing that project. You might even leave it until the day before the end to get it done. So give yourself some constraints to get it done, and it puts you into a bias of action. Otherwise, I think this is Parkinson's law. You end up just filling up that time, however much time you give yourself. So give yourself a constraint, and I think that just increases your ability to focus. So that's one thing in terms of work, is ask yourself, what would a productive week look like to me? But also thinking, how can you start integrating some periods of me time and rest? Now, if you are in a place where you have to be at your desk and you can't be away too long, well, for lunchtime, how do you grab lunch outside? How do you go for a walk? Enjoy some time outside. If you have meeting rooms in your office, well, maybe how can you book in an hour in a meeting room? People looking at your calendar would just see it as a meeting, but it could be just a meeting with yourself, where you can go into a meeting room, you have your diary, you have your laptop, maybe it gives you some time to just focus on your work, focus on getting something done for yourself. Because when you're in an office, most offices these days, you're exposed to all your colleagues being around you. It can really damage your attention. You have the emails coming in, you have someone going past your desk saying, hey, can you follow up with this for me? And so there's all of these pings coming in that you just don't have the space to focus on the things have to get done. Yeah.
I think this is so important, because also that kind of getting some quiet time from all the noise and the constant interruptions, right?
Absolutely. This is why, one of the anecdotes I shared in the book is how Thomas Edison would go fishing every day for 1 hour. And he didn't go fishing to catch a fish. All the time he spent fishing, he never caught a single fish. And the reason was because he never used any bait. So no one, not even the fish, would disturb him. the sole purpose of this activity was to just be in this space of no distraction, to be in this space where he could be with just his thoughts. And he would often credit those periods of time for giving him the insight and the wisdom for those breakthroughs. When he returned back to the office, he would go, I've got this idea. I know how we should explore this invention that I've just had. Yeah. He needed that time for disconnection.
Such a great example. I really love that.
Thank you.
So with everything we've discussed, Simon, I wonder, can you then be high energy without knowing your purpose? Or is that a contradiction?
You can be high energy short term, but to thrive over the longer term, it's important to have a purpose. So what I mean by this is you can be low energy, you can hit the gym and suddenly you're high energy again. But that only lasts for so long. It's a short-term fix. It's like drinking coffee. You drink coffee, you feel high again. You find some artificial energy, but it doesn't last long. To really thrive over the long term, you have to understand your purpose. You have to understand what you're working towards, because that purpose allows you to navigate life's inevitable setbacks and challenges, which you will have at some point. But purpose is what gets you through those tough times. If you don't have clarity on what you're working towards, or there's no sense of purpose, when you have those tough moments, you give up. You question yourself, why am I doing this? And then you stop doing the thing and you're not consistent anymore. But if you have purpose on a mission that is bigger than yourself, where you need other people to join you in making that mission or vision a reality, then you accept that there will be moments where things aren't going to go your way. You accept you're going to have setbacks and challenges. So I think purpose helps you navigate the roller coaster of the journey that we all go on. Yeah. And also wakes you up in the morning. It wakes you up in a different way to doing something you hate. On Monday morning, you dread waking up. But if you have purpose and something you're working towards that is clear and meaningful, you wake up on a Monday morning with this smell of possibility. You wake up with this excitement of what can be in the new week ahead.
Yeah. It's really about knowing your why.
Yeah.
It's so great. And something I'm very curious about is, with everything you're hearing and seeing at the moment, what is it that high achievers or high performers are actually optimizing for? And do you think it truly is what they say it is, or that they even think it is?
Well, I think what people are optimizing for now, when I think generally in terms of businesses, in terms of society, is community. Community is something a lot of people are optimizing for, because we are losing that in the online world. All of this AI means that we are creating content faster than ever, but a lot of it isn't real. You might be interacting with someone, but you might not be interacting with them. You might be interacting with their AI avatar, or you might be in an automated sequence. So we're losing that human connection online. And so a lot of businesses and brands and communities are taking people away from the online world into real life community connection. Connection, I think, is something I'm seeing more people optimize for. And I think what that's showing me is, as AI becomes more mainstream, humanness is going to be the thing that is going to be the differential. If you have somebody in an organization that is vulnerable, that shows their humanity, you feel a deeper connection to them than if you just saw them virtually and your relationship was only through social media. Yeah. So I think optimizing for community, because we lack connection, even though we're more connected than ever online, that's becoming something I'm seeing a lot happen right now. And it's just a great reminder of how the best relationships happen in person. It's where we connect with other humans.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you so much, Simon. I really appreciate you sharing with us today. And thank you so much for all these really incredible insights.
Thank you so much for having me.
Simon, for our listeners, so one way to follow your work is obviously to read your best-selling book, if they haven't yet, Energize. What else is coming up? How can people stay connected? Yeah,
so to stay connected, you can sign up to my newsletter at simonalexanderong.com. Or feel free to follow my social media on my YouTube. You can just search my name, LinkedIn or Instagram, where my handle is at simonalexanderO.
Perfect. And we'll make sure to also highlight the socials and your resources in the show notes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Simon.